This Christmas, instead of making desserts that aren't South African at all, I'm going to take a South African classic, the milk tart, and make it Christmassy. It's already got cinnamon in it, and it's the perfect base to add all those delicious spices and really make it a show-stopping dessert. So we're going to start off by making the pastry, which is a sweet short crust pastry. And I'm going to zhuzh it up with a bit of spices just to give it that kind of Christmassy feel. So we're going to start by adding the flour into the food processor. If you want to do this by hand, you can. Just make sure you don't work it a lot. Flour. And then I'm going to add the spices. I've got cinnamon here and some mixed spice, and then we're going to grate some fresh nutmeg in. Fresh nutmeg is so much better than the already ground nutmeg. It's got such a nice fragrance to it, but not too much because it can be quite strong. Okay, and then we've got some ginger in. Our molasses sugar, this is the Natura molasses sugar. It's loaded with flavor. It's got a really rich treacle flavor, which is perfect for sort of these Christmassy desserts, gingerbread, if you're making a steamed pudding, Christmas cake. It's the most unrefined of all the sugars because it's still got all the sort of molasses flavor sort of locked inside, and it really is going to ramp up the flavor of the pastry. So I'm going to add that. Okay. And then we're going to add our butter. I always use salted butter because the unsalted butter is so expensive, and I'll rather just add salt if I need to, or I'll remove the salt, either way. And then we're done. Put on the lid. This isn't on. Scared of a food processor. Okay, so you're just going to pulse it until the butter is broken up, and you want still little pieces of butter because that's going to make your pastry nice and flaky. And then we're going to add our egg yolks. Mine already broken because I've got them left over from another recipe. Okay, it's 3 egg yolks. And egg yolk, man. And then we're going to pulse it until it comes together. This is important not to overwork it, so don't put it on and walk away, because otherwise you're going to work up too much gluten. Your pastry is going to shrink later. Nobody likes shrinky pastry. Almost there. Depending on the amount of water that is in your butter or your eggs or your flour, you might need to add a few drops extra just to bring it together, which is what I'm going to have to do. Little bit at a time. Okay, so you can see it's come together nicely, and you can test it by kind of taking a little bit, making it into a ball, then you know you're on the right track. Okay, we're gonna tip it out onto a surface, just bring it together, and then we're gonna rest it a bit because obviously we've worked it quite a lot and we want the gluten to relax and chill out, have a holiday in the fridge. Okay, so press it into a disc. This just allows it to chill easier. And then wrap it in some cling wrap. Thanks, Sophia. This is the compostable cling wrap. Okay, now this is going to go into the fridge for 30 minutes, and then we're going to roll it out. Okay, so our pastry is nice and thin. Just using a palette knife to make sure it doesn't stick. And wrecking it at the same time. Gentle movements. Okay, then I'm going to make them a little bit more modern. So we all know these, what do you call them? Fluted tartans. Yeah, that's the name. But I'm going to make them a little bit more modern and use the straight-edged rings. And these are perforated, which allows the air to flow, and it bakes them really nice and evenly, and they go beautiful golden brown. But you can totally use these. I just feel like being a bit schmancy. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to cut it into smaller pieces that are easier for me to sort of handle. And then on a baking tray, this one is lined with silicone baking mat, but you can use baking paper. And then you just gently lift the pastry. And then I'm going to work on, no, I'm going to work here. Yes, I'm going to work here. And I'm going to press it in. And then just move it onto here. And gently just push the pastry into the corners and up the sides. So if it breaks, you don't have to panic. You can just take a little bit of the dough and push it in. Remember, we're filling it anyway, and nobody is gonna know. Then if you want to really get into the corners, you can use a little piece of dough. I'm just going to break off a piece here. Make a little ball. If your fingers can't get into the little cracks, and you can use the ball to push it into the corner. Clever. Then what I do is I like to leave a bit of an overhang. You can obviously trim some of the pastry off, but I like to leave some of it just so that in case it shrinks a bit while baking, it will kind of make up for that, and then I'll trim it afterwards. So no one will ever know that I had shrinky pastry. Okay, so my tarts are done. They look a little bit rustic. I was going to say rough, and then I was going to rough-stick. So my tarts are done. They look a little bit rough, but we're going to trim them, and they're going to be beautiful when they come out the oven. They're going to go into the fridge now for 30 minutes, and then we're going to blind bake them. So to prepare them for blind baking, we're going to put a little piece of baking paper into each one, fill with baking beads, or if you've got rice or sort of dried chickpeas also work. And then this is just to weigh down the bottom, so while they're baking you get that perfect pastry case. There's no bubbles, and it's a really important part of tart making. I'm going to use baking beads, and so you just fill each one. It doesn't have to be a lot, you just need to weigh the paper down a bit. And the refrigerating is also really important because you want all the butter in the pastry to set so it doesn't seep out during baking. Off to the fridge. So while our tarts are in the fridge, I'm going to make the filling, which is a pretty standard milk tart filling, except I'm going to add some spices and a little bit of orange zest to zhuzh it up. So we're going to start by heating the milk. It's 950 ml of milk. And then we're going to add a cinnamon stick. I like to break it just to release flavor, and then fresh bay leaves. I love using bay leaves in sweet desserts They add such a beautiful fragrance to them, and if you can get the fresh ones, then it's even better. I'm gonna add 2 and 1 for luck. And then we're going to heat this up to infuse nicely. Oh, the orange zest. Okay, I'm gonna zest in the orange. I like to do it over the pot, so all the oils that are sort of spraying out everywhere go into the milk, because that's where all the beautiful flavor is. So while that's infusing in a bowl, I'm going to make what's going to thicken the custard. So I've got cornstarch here, or maizena, whatever you want to call it, and some flour. And then I'm going to use the Natura Sugar's golden caster sugar, which is a beautiful fine texture. So it's going to dissolve nice and quickly, and it's also it's not too full-bodied because I want the spices in the custard to really shine. And then 3 eggs. And then we're going to whisk it all together. So by making a paste before you add the milk, this stops it from getting lumps. And we're going to temper in the hot milk in a moment. Okay, the milk is now just below boiling point, which is perfect. So I'm going to actually leave the heat on because I'm going to use it in a second. Then I'm going to strain it into our whisked egg mixture. I'm just going to put a sieve in, because I want to catch all the goodies. Strain it out because I don't want bits in, and whisk. So this is just to stop it forming lumps. So if you had to add the egg mixture straight into the hot milk, it would clump and be lumpy, and lumpy custard is just gross. Nobody likes lumpy custard. That would make a great t-shirt. Who would buy a t-shirt that says nobody likes lumpy custard? Okay, it goes back into the same pot. A tsunami of custard. And then we're just gonna whisk it over a slow, gentle heat until it starts getting thick. Once it starts thickening, I like to swap to a wooden spoon. I find that the whisk can kind of break up the custard and make it thinner, and it's nice to use a wooden spoon every now and then. That's my tarts. So once the custard is thickened, you just need to make sure that all the cornstarch and the flour has cooked out. So give it a quick taste. If it tastes floury, then obviously cook it a bit more. It's yum. That's done, so I can take it off the heat. And then I'm just going to stir in a little bit of butter just to add some richness. Okay, so these are finished baking, and we're going to just trim off the edges. So one tip that I like to do if I think that the edges are still a little bit rough is I take a microplane, and then you just gently shave off the bits that are sticking out. This one. Put them back in here. And then we're going to fill them with our custard. And then it's not a milk tart without a dusting of cinnamon. I'm going to use the cute little Christmas stencils to make them look pretty. Ah, look how cute! So cute. That makes me so happy. Ta-da! And those are my Christmas milk tarts. The most wonderful tarts of the year. Sorry. Thank you. Depending on your pastry,
Your puff pastry.
your puff pastry. That's another recipe. I mean, I'm not Martha Stewart.
It's not a perfect life.
Ready? Okay, then I'm going to mix things together, yes. The milk, it would just words. So once the tarts are thickened, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with
You're
my
having
brain?
poop brain like I had yesterday.
Poop brain.